The piercing sound of the alarm echoed through the fire station, jolting Lucas out of his thoughts. He set down his lukewarm coffee and sprinted toward the truck with the practiced precision of someone who had done this hundreds of times. The sirens blared as the vehicle picked up speed down the city streets. Lucas, his eyes fixed on the horizon, felt the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him. But deep down, he knew the heaviest burden he carried wasn't the flames he battled, it was the growing distance between him and Clara, his wife. 10 years ago, when he said "I do" at the altar, Lucas was certain that God was at the center of it all. He and Clara had built a home filled with dreams and promises. Now, however, it felt like something had been lost. Their conversations had grown short and shallow, limited to grocery lists and the kids' schedules. Some nights, Clara didn't even wait for him to get home from work. She simply turned off the lights and went upstairs, leaving behind the echo of silence. The truck came to an abrupt halt, snapping Lucas back to reality. The scene ahead was chaotic. A 3-story building was engulfed in flames, with frightened residents crowding the sidewalk. Lucas adjusted his helmet, tightened his gloves, and led his team toward the fire. The instructions were clear: save lives at all costs. Climbing the smoke-filled stairs, Lucas came across a woman clutching a baby. Her eyes were a mixture of desperation and hope. He carefully guided her to the exit, shielding her from the falling embers. Every step was a battle against the heat and smoke. When they finally reached safety, the woman gripped his hand tightly and murmured, "God bless you," before disappearing into the crowd. Back in the building, Lucas heard crying from the top floor. He raced upward, ignoring the burning in his muscles and the struggle to breathe. There, under a table, he found a child trembling with fear. Using his calmest voice, he coaxed the boy to come out. As soon as he scooped the child into his arms, the ceiling began to give way. A flaming beam crashed down just a few feet from where they stood. Lucas held his breath, and a prayer escaped his lips before he even realized it. "Lord, help me get out of here." Time seemed to slow as he dashed toward the exit, dodging debris. When he finally emerged from the building with the boy safely in his arms, he was met with applause and tears. But inside Lucas, something stirred. It was a strange feeling, a mix of gratitude and emptiness. Back at the station, as he peeled off the heavy gear, Ricardo, his best friend and teammate, gave him a curious look. "Are you okay?" Ricardo asked, handing him a bottle of water.
"Yeah,"
Lucas replied after taking a long sip. "Just thinking." Thinking about what? Lucas hesitated. How could he put into words something he didn't fully understand himself? Nothing. Just the boy. That was close. Ricardo nodded, though it was clear he suspected there was more to it. "You know, Lucas, sometimes we need more than courage. We need faith." Lucas offered a faint smile, pretending to agree. But the truth was, that word, faith, touched a part of him he preferred to ignore. He had once had faith. He had believed that God was the flame lighting his path. Now, everything felt dark. When Lucas got home that night, the house was as silent as ever. Clara was asleep in the bedroom, and the kids were in their own worlds. Passing through the kitchen, he noticed the dishes piled up in the sink and a note from Clara on the counter: "Had dinner with the kids. Your food is in the microwave." He sighed, feeling the weight of another day ending without connection to the people who mattered most. As he warmed up his dinner, his mind returned to that moment in the flames when he had prayed. It had been years since he'd done that. Why now? Later, as he lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling, one persistent thought echoed in his mind, maybe it's time to change. Before I lose everything. The next morning, Lucas woke to the sound of birds chirping at the window and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. For a brief moment, everything felt calm, almost like it used to be. But as he headed downstairs, reality hit him. Clara stood with her back to him, packing the kids' lunches, while Pedro and Julia, still groggy, bickered over a piece of bread at the table. "Good morning," Lucas said hesitantly. "Good morning," Clara replied without turning around. The words carried a distance far greater than the physical space between them. Lucas sat at the table, but before he could start a conversation, Clara was already rushing the kids out the door. "Julia, put on your jacket. Pedro, your notebook is in the living room. Let's go. You're going to be late." As Clara ushered them out, Lucas remained alone in the kitchen, his coffee growing cold in the mug. It wasn't the first time he'd felt like a stranger in his own home, but today, the feeling was unbearable. Something had to change. He didn't know how, but he knew this couldn't continue. At the fire station, as he inspected his gear, Ricardo approached him with a concerned look. "Hey, man, you've been acting weird lately. Everything okay, at home?" Ricardo asked, as direct as ever. Lucas hesitated. Talking about his problems had never been easy, but something about Ricardo's tone encouraged him. "It's Clara and me. It feels like we're living as strangers. I get home, she's busy with the kids, and when I try to talk to her, it's like nothing I say makes a difference." Ricardo crossed his arms and nodded slowly. "Man, that's more common than you'd think. But have you tried stopping to really listen to how she's feeling? And you think she wants to talk to me?" Lucas replied, skepticism thick in his voice. "Maybe not right now. But sometimes, when you let God into the cracks, he does the rest." Lucas let out a dry laugh. "God? I don't know, man. It's been a long time since I thought about that. Clara still believes, I think, but me? I wouldn't even know where to start." Ricardo gave him a serious look. "Maybe that's the problem." Those words stuck with Lucas for the rest of the day. Ricardo had always been strong in his faith, but he never pushed. This time, though, the simplicity of what he said stirred something in Lucas. When Lucas returned home that evening, he found Clara on the couch with a notebook in her lap. It was her old study Bible, the same one she used back when they went to church together. He paused in the doorway, watching her for a moment, unable to step inside. "Are you okay?" Clara asked without looking up.
Yeah.
"Just tired," Lucas said, hesitating before taking a step forward. "And you?" Clara slowly closed the Bible and looked up at him. Her eyes were filled with a quiet sadness. "I'm trying to be." Lucas felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Before he could try, Clara stood. "I'm going to bed. Good night." She passed by him, leaving behind a faint trace of her perfume and an even heavier sense of emptiness. Lucas stayed there, staring at the Bible she'd left on the table. He knew it was an open door, but he felt powerless to walk through it. Later, as he lay in bed, memories of the past began to flood his mind. He thought of the early years of their marriage, the nights they prayed together, and the promises they made to build a family grounded in faith. Where had it all gone wrong? With his eyes open in the dark, Lucas did something he hadn't done in years. He prayed, though haltingly. God, if you're still there, show me what to do." There was no audible reply, no instant miracle. Just silence, a silence that, somehow, felt a little less heavy. Lucas closed his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a fragile thread of hope. The week flew by in a blur, with Lucas consumed by the relentless pace of his job. Emergencies came without warning, leaving little time to dwell on the prayer he'd made. Yet something inside him had shifted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but in the quiet moments, he found himself reflecting on God, Clara, and the cracks threatening his family. That Friday, the fire station received a high-priority call. A fire was tearing through an old residential building. Initial reports indicated that residents were still trapped inside. When the team arrived, the scene was pure chaos. Flames licked hungrily at the windows, and thick black smoke billowed into the gray sky. Lucas adjusted his helmet and led the team inside. With every step, the heat grew more intense, and visibility decreased. Nervous voices crackled over the radio, but Lucas stayed focused. Experience had taught him that panic was the real enemy in situations like these. On the third floor, he found a young couple trapped in an apartment. The door was locked, but Lucas and Ricardo managed to break it down together. Inside, the air was barely breathable. The woman was crying while the man struggled futilely with a jammed window. "We're with the rescue team. We'll get you out," Lucas shouted, his voice muffled by the mask. With precision and urgency, the team guided the couple to safety. But soon after, the radio buzzed with news. People were still trapped on the upper floors. Lucas knew time was running out. The heat was becoming unbearable, and the building's structure showed signs of imminent collapse. "I'm going up," Lucas announced without hesitation. "Lucas, the building won't hold," Ricardo warned, but Lucas was already moving. The fourth floor was a maze of smoke and fire. Forcing open one of the apartment doors, Lucas found an elderly woman slumped against the wall, struggling to breathe. Without a second thought, he lifted her into his arms and began the descent. Each step was a battle against heat and suffocating smoke, but he made it outside. As paramedics took over, the radio crackled again. One more person was still trapped inside. "I'm going back," Lucas called to Ricardo, who stared at him with a mix of worry and frustration. "Don't do anything stupid, Lucas," Ricardo shouted after him, but he knew his friend wasn't one to back down. Inside the building, Lucas found the final resident, a middle-aged man cornered in the hallway. Before Lucas could reach him, an explosion from below shook the structure, causing part of the ceiling to collapse. Lucas was thrown against the wall, his helmet knocked off, leaving him exposed. Dazed and with his vision blurring, he tried to move but found himself pinned beneath a heavy beam. The pain was excruciating, and the smoke grew thicker, choking the air. For the first time in years, Lucas felt genuine fear that this might be the end. In the midst of his despair, he prayed once more. "Lord, I need your help. Not for me, but for my family. Give me another chance to make things right." As he prayed, a surge of strength coursed through him. With a superhuman effort, he managed to shift the beam enough to free himself. Stumbling, he reached the unconscious man and dragged him toward the exit. Just as they cleared the building, another explosion tore through the upper floor. Outside, Lucas collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. The cheers of the crowd and the wail of sirens seemed distant. All he felt was relief to be alive. He handed the man over to the paramedics, then dropped his head, overwhelmed by exhaustion and gratitude. Ricardo ran up and helped him to his feet. "You're insane, you know that?" Ricardo said, equal parts angry and relieved. Lucas chuckled, still catching his breath. "Maybe. But I wasn't alone in there." Ricardo gave him a curious look but said nothing. Deep down, he understood what Lucas meant. Later that night, Lucas returned home, utterly drained. Clara was already asleep, but before heading to bed, he stopped by the kids' room. Pedro and Julia were sound asleep, their small faces peaceful in the dim light. Lucas stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching them. His heart felt heavy, but for the first time in years, he also felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fire he faced at home was different from the ones he extinguished at work. It was slower, more insidious, but just as destructive. And yet, for the first time in a long while, Lucas believed there was hope. He felt that God was with him, guiding him back to the path he needed to take. The next morning, Lucas woke to the soft sound of Julia's laughter in the hallway. Opening his eyes, he saw Clara leaning against the bedroom doorframe, already dressed to leave. Her expression was serious, but there was something different about it. "Good morning," she said in a neutral tone. "I'm taking the kids to school and then heading to the market. Will you be here when I get back?" Lucas nodded. "I will." Clara left without another word, and Lucas stared at the ceiling, pondering the weight of her question. "Will you be here when I get back?" He knew it wasn't just about his physical presence. Clara was asking for more. She was asking if he was ready to fight for their family. After breakfast, Lucas received an unexpected call. It was Pastor Marcos, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. The voice on the other end of the line was warm and familiar. "Lucas," Clara shared a bit about what's been going on. "I know things haven't been easy, but I want you to know I'm praying for you. If you ever need to talk, my door's open." Lucas nearly hung up. Something about hearing the word praying made him feel exposed and vulnerable. But deep down, the same instinct that had driven him to pray in the middle of the fire stopped him. "Thank you, Pastor," he said, more sincerely than he expected. "Maybe I'll stop by later." When Lucas arrived at the church, the building was nearly empty. Pastor Marcos sat in one of the front pews, leafing through his Bible. When he saw Lucas, he smiled warmly. "Lucas! I'm glad you came." Lucas sat down beside him, his eyes drawn to the colorful stained glass windows. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The silence felt heavy, like a prelude to something important. "It's been a long time, hasn't it?" the pastor finally said. "I remember when you and Clara came here almost every Sunday. You were an inspiration to so many young couples." Lucas let out a bitter laugh.
"Yeah,
"And look where we are now." The pastor nodded, his expression free of judgment. "Life weighs on us sometimes. But God doesn't abandon us, even when we feel far from Him." "I don't know if I can be that guy again," Lucas admitted, staring at the floor. "I'm not even sure I want to. It feels like I've already lost so much, with Clara, with the kids." The pastor leaned forward, his voice softer now. "Lucas, faith isn't about pretending nothing's happened or trying to go back to who you were. It's about admitting you need help. It's about letting God rebuild you, one step at a time." Lucas stayed silent, the words hitting a place deep within him. They echoed feelings he hadn't been able to articulate. Finally, he took a deep breath and asked, "What if it's too late?" The pastor smiled, like someone who'd heard the question many times before. It's never too late when God's involved. As Lucas left the church, he felt a mix of relief and discomfort. Relief at having opened up to someone, but discomfort at knowing the hardest part was still ahead. He needed to face Clara, to ask for her forgiveness, and to show her he was ready to change, not just for her, but for God and for himself. That evening, Lucas found Clara in the living room, folding laundry. Her Bible was still on the table, and seeing it gave him an unexpected push. "Clara, can we talk?" he asked, trying not to sound hesitant. She paused and looked at him, surprised. "Sure." Lucas sat down on the couch next to her, running his hands through his hair. Finding the right words wasn't easy, but he knew he couldn't hold back any longer. I know I've failed you, the kids, and God," he began. "I know I've left you to carry so much on your own, and I've lost the faith that held us together in the beginning. But I want to change. I want to be better for you, for us." Clara blinked a few times, clearly taken aback by his sincerity. "Lucas, you've said before that you wanted to change. But in the end, things always go back to how they were." "I know," he admitted. "But this time, I don't want to do it alone. I want to ask God to help me rebuild what we've lost. I want you to give me another chance, not just to be your husband, but to be the man you deserve." Clara looked at him for a long moment, her eyes filling with tears. "Lucas, I want to believe you. But it's going to take time. And it's going to hurt." He nodded, his expression steady. "I'm ready." That night didn't end with a warm embrace or declarations of renewed love. But it was the start of something. For the first time in years, Clara left her Bible on the table where Lucas could open it if he wanted to. Later, in the quiet of the house, he did just that. He didn't understand everything he read, but one verse stood out to him. "The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer," Psalm 18 verse 2. Lucas closed the Bible, feeling a little stronger. He knew the road ahead would be long, but for the first time in years, he had something more valuable than answers, he had hope. Saturday dawned with a gentle rain, the sound of droplets tapping against the windows filling the house with a soothing rhythm. Clara was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, while the children played in the living room. Lucas came down the stairs slowly, greeted by the familiar aroma of toasted bread and freshly brewed coffee. The scene was simple, yet it carried a sense of peace he hadn't noticed in a long time. Clara glanced at him as she spread butter on a slice of bread. "Did you sleep well?" she asked casually. "Better than I have in days," he replied, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. She didn't say anything more, but Lucas noticed a brief smile on her lips. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible, but to him, it felt like a spark, proof that perhaps the wall between them wasn't as unbreakable as it seemed. After breakfast, Lucas suggested something he hadn't in years. "Clara, how about we take the kids to the park today? Just the four of us." Clara looked up, surprised. "You're off today?" "Yes. And I think it's been far too long since we did something together." Clara hesitated for a moment but then nodded. "All right." Later, as they strolled through the park, Lucas noticed how excited Pedro and Julia were to have him there. They ran across the grass, laughing and calling for him to join their games. He joined in, tossing a ball to them while Clara watched from a distance, a quiet smile playing on her lips. During a pause, as the children played on their own, Lucas approached Clara. "Thank you for coming. I know this doesn't change everything, but I want to start somewhere." She looked at him, her expression thoughtful as if weighing the sincerity in his words. "Lucas, I won't lie to you. I'm still hurt. For years, I felt alone, even with you here. I don't know if I can fully trust you yet." He nodded, respecting her honesty. "I understand. I don't expect everything to go back to normal overnight. But I want to show you, day by day, that I'm here. That I'm fighting for us." Clara averted her gaze, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. That evening, after they put the children to bed, Clara sat in the living room with her Bible. Lucas walked in soon after, carrying 2 cups of tea. He hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Can I join you?" Clara looked up, surprised, but she motioned for him to sit beside her. Together, they read a passage from the Gospel of Matthew about forgiveness and reconciliation. The words seemed to speak directly to Lucas, as if written specifically for that moment. After the reading, Clara asked softly, "Would you like to pray?" Lucas took a deep breath, a mix of nervousness and determination rising within him. He took her hand and, with a slightly trembling voice, began. "God, I know I have a lot to learn and so much to ask forgiveness for. Thank you for not giving up on me and for giving me this second chance. Help me to be the husband and father my family needs. And above all, help Clara find reasons to trust me again." When he finished, Clara's eyes were glistening with tears. She squeezed his hand, a simple gesture that felt like an answer to his prayer. That night, as Lucas lay in bed, he felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. He knew there was still a long road ahead, but he was ready to face each day with the strength that came from his rediscovered faith and the love that still lingered between him and Clara. The days that followed were marked by a new rhythm in Lucas and Clara's home. Small gestures began to fill the once insurmountable void. Lucas made it a point to be present for meals, helped Clara with household chores, and, for the first time in years, joined the children's bedtime prayers. Yet, he knew there was a deeper challenge he had to face, the weight of forgiveness. One afternoon, while Clara was folding clothes in their bedroom, Lucas decided it was time. He walked in and sat on the edge of the bed, holding one of Pedro's shirts in his hands as if to steady himself. "Clara," he began softly, "I know we're far from being okay, yet. But there's something I need to say." She stopped what she was doing and turned to face him, her eyes attentive but cautious. "I need to ask for your forgiveness," Lucas continued. "For all the times I left you alone, even when I was here. For not seeing how much you were fighting while I buried myself in work. And, for walking away from God, from us, and from the family I promised to care for." Clara watched him in silence, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pain and surprise. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," he added. "But I want you to know that I see how much I've hurt you. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust back." A heavy silence followed. Clara turned her gaze toward the window, as if searching for strength. When she finally looked back at him, her voice was firm but laden with emotion. "Lucas, hearing you say this means a lot. But, forgiveness isn't easy. I've carried so much hurt, so many moments where I felt invisible." "I know," he replied earnestly. "And I don't expect it to be easy. I just want you to know I'm here, and I'm not giving up on us." Clara let out a deep sigh, her hands gripping one of the shirts tightly. Finally, she said, "I want to believe you, Lucas. I really do. But I need time." Lucas nodded, a mix of relief and frustration washing over him. It wasn't the response he'd hoped for, but it wasn't a closed door either. That night, Lucas went to the church alone. He sat in one of the back pews, where he could quietly take in the stained glass windows illuminated by the soft glow of the lamps. In the stillness, he prayed. God, thank you for giving me the strength to face this. Help me to be patient, to keep fighting. I know her forgiveness may take time, but I trust in your timing. As he prayed, he felt a sense of relief, as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He understood that the road ahead would be long, but he wasn't walking it alone. God was with him, guiding each step. The next morning, Clara surprised him by placing her hand over his as they sat at the breakfast table. "Lucas, did you go to church yesterday?" she asked, her tone curious. He nodded. "I did. I went to pray. To ask for strength to keep fighting for us." Clara gave him a faint smile, a glimmer of something softer in her expression. "That's good. I think I need strength too." It was a simple gesture, but Lucas felt as though a wall between them had begun to crumble. The weight of forgiveness hadn't disappeared, but it felt less overwhelming when carried together. The sky was gray that afternoon, carrying the heavy scent of impending rain. Lucas was at the fire station, inspecting equipment and chatting with Ricardo about recent challenges, when the alarm blared. A large-scale fire had broken out at a factory on the outskirts of the city, threatening not only the building but also the nearby homes. The team mobilized quickly, and Lucas felt his heart race as the truck approached the scene. The fire had already consumed part of the factory's structure, and the heat was almost tangible. There were screams, smoke, and people running frantically to escape the danger. Upon arrival, Lucas immediately took command of a team that would enter the building to ensure no one was trapped inside. Ricardo approached him, holding the radio. "Lucas, we've got reports that some workers stayed behind trying to save equipment. They might be in the north sector." Lucas nodded, the weight of the decision settling on him. "Let's get them." Inside the factory, visibility was nearly non-existent. The crackling of flames mixed with the snapping of wood and the metallic groan of machinery. Lucas led his team cautiously, issuing quick commands as they searched for signs of life. Finally, in the north sector, they found 3 men cornered by a stack of burning crates. The workers were terrified, coughing and shielding their faces with scraps of fabric. Lucas approached them, his voice steady as he reassured them, while his team worked to clear a safe path. "We're getting out of here. Follow my lead," Lucas commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. One by one, the men were guided toward the exit. But just as they were nearing safety, an explosion rocked the building. Part of the ceiling collapsed, separating Lucas from Ricardo and the rest of the team. Lucas was now trapped with one of the men, a young worker frozen in fear. "I'm not leaving you here," Lucas shouted, grabbing the man's arm. "Trust me." As he searched for an alternative route, the heat intensified, and the oxygen grew scarce. Desperation threatened to take hold, but in the midst of the chaos, Lucas remembered the pastor's words, "God is our fortress." He closed his eyes briefly and prayed. "Lord, I know I can't do this on my own. Guide me. Show me the way." Almost as if in response, Lucas noticed a small opening among the wreckage. He led the man through it, shielding him from the embers and clearing debris as they went. When they finally emerged outside, the worker stumbled into the care of paramedics waiting nearby. Ricardo ran toward Lucas, his face etched with worry. "I thought you weren't going to make it out." Lucas smiled, still catching his breath. "So did I. But I had help." Ricardo looked at him with a mix of curiosity and relief but didn't press further. Once the fire was under control and the area declared safe, Lucas sat in a quiet corner, watching the sky as it began to clear. The feeling that enveloped him wasn't just physical exhaustion, it was gratitude. Gratitude for being alive, for making a difference, and for sensing God's presence in such a critical moment. That night, when Lucas returned home, Clara was waiting for him in the living room. "I heard about the fire on the news," she said, her tone filled with concern. "Are you okay?" Lucas nodded and stepped closer, taking her hands in his. "Today was tough, but God was with me. He gave me the strength to make it out." Clara looked at him, surprised but moved by the sincerity in his voice. She squeezed his hands and said softly, "I think I'm finally starting to believe that you're changing, Lucas." He pulled her into a hug, an overwhelming wave of emotion flooding his heart. In that moment, he knew that every step, every prayer, was worth it. The days following the fire marked a quiet yet profound transformation in Lucas and Clara's lives. Lucas noticed that Clara seemed more open, though still cautious. There were no grand promises, just small gestures that suggested she was beginning to believe in him again. Lucas, in turn, remained steadfast in his commitment to rebuilding the trust and faith he had once let slip away. On a Sunday morning, Clara surprised Lucas with a suggestion he hadn't expected. "The kids are getting ready for church," she said. "Would you like to come with us today?" Lucas stopped adjusting his tie in front of the mirror and turned to look at her standing in the doorway, holding a blue dress on a hanger. There was hope in her voice, but also a trace of uncertainty. "I'd love to," he replied with a genuine smile. At church, they sat together as a family for the first time in years. During the sermon, Pastor Marcos spoke about rebuilding, drawing from the story of Nehemiah and the reconstruction of Jerusalem's walls. Just as Nehemiah faced challenges while rebuilding the walls, we too face difficulties in restoring the broken areas of our lives, the pastor said, his voice resonating through the sanctuary. "But God gives us strength and wisdom when we surrender to His plan." The words struck a chord in Lucas. He reached for Clara's hand beside him, and as their fingers intertwined, he felt that this moment was a turning point, not just for him, but for their entire family. That Sunday night, after the kids had gone to bed, Clara brought 2 cups of tea and sat beside Lucas on the couch. "I've noticed the changes in you," Clara said. "Not just in how you treat me and the kids, but in the way you've been seeking God again." Lucas smiled softly, staring at the cup in his hands. "I still have so much to learn, but I feel like I'm finally on the right path." Clara placed her hand over his. "I'm ready to try again. It won't be easy, but I'm willing to walk this journey with you." Her words were a balm to Lucas's heart. He knew that forgiveness was a process, but this was the clearest sign yet that they were moving forward. Over the following weeks, Lucas and Clara's bond grew stronger. They resumed the habit of praying together and began dedicating evenings to family Bible readings. Lucas also deepened his connection with his children, spending time helping with homework or simply playing with them in the backyard. One day, while walking with Ricardo after work, Lucas shared something that had been on his heart. "Ever since I started putting God back at the center of my life, things have been falling into place. Clara and I are doing better, and the kids seem happier." Ricardo smiled. "I've noticed. It's amazing what happens when you let God take the lead."
Yeah,
Lucas agreed. "But I feel like God is calling me to do more, not just for my family, but for the community. I want to help others find purpose, just like I'm finding mine." Ricardo nodded and placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder. You'd be great at that. Inspired by this idea, Lucas joined a mentoring group at the church, helping young people seeking direction in their lives. He shared his experiences, speaking about courage, faith, and the importance of perseverance in the face of life's toughest challenges. Each step he took seemed to strengthen the foundations that had once been shaken. His faith, his family, and his newfound mission were weaving together in a way he had never imagined. That night, before going to bed, Lucas prayed a heartfelt prayer of gratitude. Lord, thank you for giving me a second chance, for restoring my family and showing me that there is purpose in every struggle. Continue to guide me, and let your light shine through me to reach others. He lay down beside Clara, feeling more at peace than ever before. The rebuilding wasn't finished, but the foundation was solid, and he knew it was being upheld by something far greater than himself. It was a bright and sunny morning when Lucas walked into church with his family. A gentle buzz filled the air. Pastor Marcos had announced that today's service would be special. Lucas felt a mix of nerves and gratitude. Public speaking had never been his strength, but earlier that week, Pastor Marcos had asked him to share his testimony. In the pew, Clara gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. It's going to be beautiful. Just speak from the heart. Lucas took a deep breath. It amazed him how, in just a few months, he had transformed from a distant, closed-off man to someone ready to open his heart, to God and to others. When the moment came, Lucas walked to the pulpit. He looked out over the congregation and saw familiar faces: Ricardo, who had supported him from the beginning, Clara, smiling in encouragement, Pedro and Julia, watching with fascination as their father stood in front of everyone. Lucas began, his voice calm but steady. Good morning, everyone. I want to share with you how God saved me, not just from a dangerous job, but from a place of isolation and darkness. He spoke about his career as a firefighter and how the demands of the job had taken a toll on his family. He described the nights when Clara felt alone, as he buried himself in work, growing distant from her and the children. He shared the moments when he felt utterly lost, without faith, and how God had found him in the midst of both a literal and spiritual fire. I thought there was no hope left for me, for my marriage, or for my life, he admitted. But in that moment of desperation, I prayed, something I hadn't done in years. I asked God for a second chance, and He gave me so much more. He gave me purpose. The congregation listened intently, some with tears in their eyes. Lucas glanced at Clara and smiled before continuing. God taught me that no matter how far we feel from Him, He's always ready to welcome us back. Today, my family is being restored. It's not an easy process, but it's filled with hope and love. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. When he finished, the church erupted in applause. As Lucas stepped down from the pulpit, Clara and the kids rushed to embrace him, their pride and love radiating through their smiles. After the service, many people approached Lucas to thank him and share how they had been inspired by his story. He realized that God was using his journey to touch the lives of others, filling him with both humility and joy. In the days that followed, Lucas began organizing small gatherings with young adults and families from the church, creating a space for honest conversations about faith, challenges, and restoration. Drawing from his experiences as a firefighter, he used stories of bravery and resilience to illustrate that the hardest fires to face are often the ones burning within us. One day, as Lucas and Clara strolled through the park with their children, he turned to her and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Clara smiled, intertwining her fingers with his. "Thank you for coming back to us." The future still held its share of challenges, but Lucas knew that with God by his side, he had everything he needed to face them. His faith was now a burning flame, not just to light his own path, but to guide those around him. It was a calm afternoon, and Lucas's house was filled with life. Julia and Pedro played in the backyard, their laughter echoing in the air, while Clara prepared dinner in the kitchen. Lucas sat in the living room, reviewing notes for the next youth group meeting at church. The aroma of Clara's stew filled the house, wrapping everything in a warm sense of comfort he hadn't felt in years. He paused for a moment to take it all in. There was no luxury, no grand spectacle, just the quiet grace of God reflected in the unity of his family and the peace that had returned to their home. As the evening drew to a close, Clara called everyone to the table. During dinner, Julia did something that caught Lucas off guard. "Daddy, will you pray for us tonight?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Lucas smiled and nodded. Taking Clara's and Pedro's hands, he led the family in prayer. "Lord, thank you for this moment, for this family, and for all you have done for us. Continue to guide us and give us strength each day. Amen." When he finished, Clara looked at him warmly. "It's so good to see you leading our family like this." After dinner, as the kids got ready for bed, Lucas and Clara sat on the porch, enjoying the gentle night breeze. "You know," Clara said, leaning against his shoulder, "sometimes I look at all this, and I still can't believe it. We went through so much, but here we are." Lucas wrapped an arm around her, gazing up at the stars. "I think about that too. But I guess that's how God works. He takes our ruins and builds something stronger, something more beautiful." Clara smiled. "And he's not done with you yet, Lucas. I can feel it, he has big plans for you." In the months that followed, Lucas continued his work as a firefighter but also devoted more time to church initiatives. He led weekly meetings with the youth, helping them discover purpose and confidence in their faith. He also started organizing community talks on overcoming struggles and rebuilding relationships, using his own story as a testament to God's grace. One evening, while speaking to an audience of couples and young adults, Lucas concluded his message with a powerful reflection. "When we face the biggest fires of our lives, it's easy to feel alone. But God never abandons us. He's there, waiting to guide us, even in the middle of the flames. We just have to trust him and take the first step." The applause that followed filled Lucas's heart, but more than that, he felt joy knowing he was fulfilling a greater purpose. That night, Clara waited for him at home with a warm cup of tea and a welcoming smile. Sitting together on the couch, they watched the children sleeping peacefully through the baby monitor. "I think we've finally found our balance," Clara said, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. Lucas nodded, holding her hand. "It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And the most important thing is knowing that God is at the center of it all." They sat in silence for a while, simply enjoying the moment. For Lucas, the journey had not only restored his marriage and family but also his sense of identity and purpose. He was no longer just a firefighter saving lives, he was a man guided by faith, committed to being a light for others. That night, before going to bed, he prayed once more, thanking God for the gift of renewal. As he closed his eyes, he felt a deep and abiding peace, confident that the future ahead was bright and full of promise. This story reminds us that, even in the toughest moments, God works in our hearts and guides us toward love and reconciliation. Share your thoughts on this journey in the comments and let us know how God's love has transformed your life. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more inspiring stories like this one. This is the Embracing Narratives channel. Stay with God, and see you in the next story.